False alarm. I thought that help was here. But it was my own reassurance bouncing round 100,000 times in my own ecosphere. If every time you speak you keep it off the record, consequently you can keep your record clear. And if you mute the speech that shakes your frail beliefs, you only seek to insulate your image and continue down the stream in the direction clout and credit steers. Directly from your mouth into am I the asshole Reddit's ears. Directly back into the greasy pockets of some Gates Foundation financiers. And then directly back into the frantic final thoughts of early trial Neuralink volunteers, staring at the numb and mumbling vacancies where recently had been their peers. Half of whom are glitching with the memory stuck on pause, and half have zero fucking clue just who they are or why they're here. It's been said that fear is all we have to fear, but that was back before the basosphere condenser came along, distilling concentrated fear that's diamond pure, crystal clear, oppressor strong, and woven into every single article you read and song they let you hear. And then Elon heard that Jeff enhanced our fears by 86%, and he said, hold my beer. And not a single sheep among the herd would turn their head or say a word, cause they were all too busy begging for the shears, begging for the muzzle, happy just to guzzle, feed, and watch a screen for all their years. Man, to each his own, can't afford a home, but they'll let you have your cozy little ecosphere, where there among your own devices you can break the seventh seal, overthrow the oracles and slay the seer. All the tomes were burned and all the lips were seared. Shut your eyes and all our lives just disappear. Now blink them twice. Welcome to your ecosphere.
That's how it goes. We won't open our eyes, so we're the last ones to know. We're the last ones alive. Kept our enemies close. Wondered why we don't thrive while we're grasping at ghosts. Counting backwards from 5. Counting backwards from 5. Counting backwards from 5.
Count back from 5. The theater on fire, the cast on strike. The studio stock starts taking a dive. The contract's tossed and they're gone with the tide. The heads and execs, their hands are tied. We can't pump this dreck and treat you, right? But what do you expect from the industry type who survive by the leeching of bodies and minds? From those who original thoughts never seem to find. So they're gonna reboot ALF before your wages rise. And it gives cause to pause and reflect on the times. If they're losing control of their fools and their mimes, when all those obedient actors who grew their careers by averting their eyes are now holding the line, along with the authors of countless scripts that strengthen the hand of that corporate grip, squeezing our throats till we take the pen and we accept and consent to the corporate drip, till you're all up to date on your pharma du jour, till you got a healthy support for the war on your lips. And now you know that the advertisers need more than a rerun summer full of flashback clips. Enter the scans from the year before, all the days of de-aging and mapping the face, and the hours of actors recording their voices are links in the chains that will bind them in place. Now all of those shows are so easy to make. When they got a drone they control that needs no break, it can bend, it can break, and it's cheaply replaced enough up-to-date films all in one take. And those studios bank on us doing our duty, unhinging our jaws and digesting the fakes, because they know that we'll love how synthetic it tastes. Watch as they edit your features without any trace. Not that there's anything you could do anyway. Now watch as they show you a movie you saying shit you would never say. Dystopia boldly accelerates. Maybe you're only a mold, something to fill with a clone, something that Elon would celebrate. Something they own, something they program and code, something that's woefully able to know it's exanimate. 'Cause it doesn't feel touch over top of the laminate. You will not feel an emotion, but they will not scan and examine it. You and the other consumer contaminants fed on the federal diet of Kiev, Havana, and Tiananmen. I can't be the only one weighing the pros of abandonment. I can't be the only one weighing the pros of abandonment.
Where did you think we'd go? Love, there's nowhere to lie. Guess it's not who you know, more it's what you can hide. Like we're chained to the floor, they're streaming us live while we're watching the war, counting backwards from 5, counting backwards from 5, counting backwards from 5, counting backwards.
Land of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. How sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead. Where the thin blue line meets razor's edge. And where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death. And drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections, step by step, till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs. All laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer, that 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led.
There's a difference between peace and liberation, is there not? You can have injustice and have peace. Isn't that correct? Have peace and be enslaved.
Yes.
So peace isn't the answer.
No.
Liberation is the answer.
Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great strong land of love where never kings connived, nor tyrants schemed, that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath. But opportunity is real, and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free.
The free? Who said the free? Not me. Surely not me. The millions on relief, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay, for all the trees we dreamed, for all the songs we've sung, for all the hopes we've held, flags we've hung, the millions who have nothing for our pay except the dream that's almost dead today. Those who live like leeches on people's lives. We must take our land back again, America. Oh yeah. I say it plain. America never was America to me. And yet, I swear this oath, America will be and make America again.
Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the Negro, bearing slavery scars.
Well, you brought Langston Hughes.
I did. That was his poem, Let America Be America Again. He wrote that in 1935, believe it or not. So, pushing 100 years. And a lot of the imagery that he kind of brings out in the poem still happening, if not gotten worse since he wrote it. So, but yeah, I played him tonight. I figured that poem was going to be very fitting considering, well, I think kind of the basis of our show. You know, like the idea that America sucks, but we want it to be better. And, you know, like a lot of people, especially like on social media, are like, leftists are nihilists and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, like we understand the world is shit, but we want it to be better. We're striving to be better. And I'm sure that's why a lot of you are here. you want things to be better for yourselves and for this country, which is why you watch us, and we're very thankful for that. So yeah, we're going to talk more tonight. Welcome.
Speaking of thankful, Jack's Page with the $5 tip. Much love and respect from Mexico. Appreciate you, Jax. You keep holding it down out there. I know Puerto Vallarta is super dangerous city to live in, and it totally isn't relaxing nights on the beach and at bars and eating good food, and it's definitely just danger all the time, right? You know? But anyway, you brought some stories.
News.
Yeah.
So speaking of Langston Hughes, going to be somewhat featured in my first story tonight, brought to us by Margaret Kimberley from Black Agenda Report, and kind of touching a topic that I've been screaming about for the duration. Damn, it's almost been 4 years. Dude, next week's going to be 4 years since we've been on.
Reminding me of the passage of time. There he goes again, reminding me about it. Time, it keeps moving. Oh no. Oh.
Yeah, we're not even going to be live next week, but whatever.
Whatever. I might pull together something. So.
All right. Well, she brings up something that I've mentioned many, many times, and she wrote an article about it. Like, where are the black liberal? Where are the black radicals?
Shit, where are the radicals? Let alone fucking, you know?
Right, basically, yeah. But, specifically, like, the black radicals that we've talked about on this show quite a bit, especially coming from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, who acted as, like, canaries in the coal mine, regarding how our struggle relates to the struggle of the world. They're intertwined. So we're gonna mention that first. And then later on tonight, probably our big story tonight, and this has been getting a lot of traction within the last day or so. The National Counterterrorism Center Director, former Joe Kent, has resigned. He gave his reasons, basically being like, I do not fuck with the idea that America is being complicit with Israel. And even in mainstream media, I'm seeing people like, oh, he's so good. Like, he's such a patriot, for quitting. And the dude's a scumbag for all intents and purposes. So, a friend of the show, The Dissonant, did a very extensive article regarding, him, but then his connections to, wars in Iraq as well as Iran. And we're going to and you brought in some stuff that basically kind of proves that this guy is a piece of shit. I mean, anyone who works for Trump can be assumed is shit. But, shouldn't get credit for doing the bare minimum, as you say. And I agree. And what did you bring?
Well, speaking of, we've also been throwing, dollars into the Caribbean to stop all sorts of things, quote unquote. And we need a bunch of, regime change manufacturing. So we've decided to roll out our old PSYOPs as new PSYOPs, and we're bringing back the Havana syndrome. I don't know if anyone remembers this nonsense. Cuba apparently has secret death rays that, get inside your mind and turn you into sleeper agents for the commie empire. This is what we're going with. I mean, it's right out of like a 60s science fiction like script, so, but we'll talk about that and just general Cuba stuff that's happening. And then this is, I think, something that everyone missed this week, partially because of things like this, but luckily we don't miss things here. We try to find these things that should be covered, but Collin, do you know about these? We've talked about it to some degree in relation to Keith McHenry and his dealings with this problem. But, and forgive me if I can't remember off the top of my head, it's some memorandum that Trump put out essentially stating that Antifa is a terrorist organization and we can go after all these groups that are supposedly Antifa, right? That's how this goes. But essentially a bunch of these people got convicted of, you know, like through RICO charges practically, on like terrorism charges. So I think this has major implications for all the people in our chat and those who protest and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, not looking good for free speech in that regard. So, but that's what I brought. So, you ready to get started?
I'm ready, but before we do that, for those of you who no one's new here at the, like you're all family, but
Yeah.
we have to do this in case we have new friends. We are monetized, but YouTube takes a huge pay cut from your giving. So for every $1 you give, they'll take 30 cents. So you can give for YouTube if you want. If you want to ensure that more of your money goes to us, so we're able to pay our bills, and any extra money that we're able to have, we can support our network colleagues as far as equipment and stuff. At least for now, we obviously want to do more. The more with our financing, the more money we get. You can go to Ko-fi by scanning the QR code, or if you're in the YouTube chat and live, you can type in the Ko-fi link as you see on your screen, or if you're in the chat, you can type in ! donate, all one word, and the Ko-fi link will pop up, and you can give as little as much as you want. And considering everything is expensive and going to be expensive within the next few weeks and months, you know, we're asked everybody, you know, like, please take care of yourselves, your families, your neighbors before you get to us. We're not in this for the money. We're in this out of love. We want to make our content free to everybody. So obviously, you know, like, give what you can if you have the means. If you don't, that's more than okay. We're happy that you're here. But that being said, the free way, if you want to support us, is obviously by liking, subbing, and sharing our content. And we put out a lot of content that you guys have been watching, so you guys are awesome. And anyone who gives mucho much money ends up on our wall of fame. Well, anyone who gives at any point ends up on our wall of fame, but those of you who are like our super fans, our VIPs, your names are listed here. Your names will also be featured in our closing credits, which I think you still need to do, Reef.
Yep.
You can do that.
I'll do that this week when I don't have get all the, you know, do all the maintenance and whatnot. Like, but
as well as if you want to give via Cash App, PayPal, Patreon, or Substack, especially if you want to give monthly, you can see those links there, as well as the links will be also in the description, as always, in the show notes. But yeah, we thank you. Thank you for watching our content. You guys have been killing it. I think we're about, I want to say around 170 subs away from 3,000. That sounds about right. So maybe we can hit that within the next month or so. Maybe, perhaps. So yeah, continue sharing our content, liking, commenting, all the things. And yeah, let's do what we can to have the,
this is what I had to deal with during a stream. This right here. This guy just hanging out up there. What are you doing? Why? No, he go boy. He's literally laying on. He's there because he's cold. He's laying on my radiator. So if the stream lags, it's his fault. It's such a good boy. Anyway, this is what I put up with. my fur baby I have to deal with.
Speaking of, if you go to our store, we have a Cats or Dicks t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shout out to Izzy for making it based on the shit I say on the show.
Yep.
The network. Because I say that.
Yep.
So, but anyway, should we get started?
Yeah. There you go.
So shout out to Black Agenda Report and Margaret Kimberley for writing this article, because I feel like this is something I've been screaming about regarding, our culture right now, as well as I think definitely in independent media, is the lack of Black radicals, especially coming off its heyday in the 60s and 70s, when we've had many of them who were able to speak truth to power in terms of how shit our country is and how we can make it better. And since they've basically been dead or like sold out,
right,
or in certain cases exiled.
Yep.
Some by choice, others not by choice.
Exiled from this plane of existence.
That too.
Like,
that too. I was being nice, but yeah, that too.
I feel you.
So, as Margaret Kimberley titles, the urgent need for the Black radical tradition. So obviously she's going to go into it a little bit. Probably, I wouldn't say superficially, but just on the surface. This and all could definitely be like a study, honestly. But she will go into the basics of it here. But she writes, the U.S. is careening towards an economic and military disaster, a moment when the Black radical tradition is missing, but badly needed. The celebrated Pan-African revolutionary who was born Stokely Carmichael became known as Kwame Ture circa 1969 at the age of 28. He died in 1998 at the age of 57, which means that he was called Kwame Ture for at least as long as he was known by his more well-known birth name. A museum dedicated to Black history should know this easy-to-discover fact, but oddly, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is based in my city, D.C., part of the Smithsonian Institute, seems unable to provide this information and still uses the name Carmichael. Either it was unknown to this museum's curators, which is unlikely, or it was deemed inconsequential or inconvenient. Perhaps it was feared that Touré's choice of names in honor of Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré would upset museum goers or, more likely, the politicians and wealthy white people who are depending upon that funding. Not only does the museum insist on using the name Carmichael when they should use Touré, but a current exhibit about historical Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, omitted any mention of the police killing of 2 young Black men at Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi on May 15, 1970. The museum is not an outlier in this regard. I raise these questions because of the need to examine a larger and very critical issue for Black people. Our radical history is being erased in ways big and small. That erasure prevents the kind of analysis that is needed in this country, as Black people are exploited and oppressed in new and terrible ways, and duopoly begins a war in Iran that may well be written about in history books as the beginning of World War III. While establishment institutions may try to justify their purge of our history, it is important to keep in mind that Black radical politics were once very much in the mainstream. Many prominent Black people who are revered and respected were also leftists and celebrated that political orientation. While their works may be well known, their political affiliations now rarely receive any attention. The poet Langston Hughes is almost always mentioned on any list of Black notables. Very few people are unaware of his role as a cultural leader in the Harlem Renaissance and as one of the nation's best-known poets. A line from his poem Harlem became the title of Lorraine Lansbury's iconic play, A Raisin in the Sun, which is still performed regularly years after its 1959 premiere on the Broadway stage. Hughes' stature is unquestioned, but he is rarely mentioned as a committed leftist who joined other Black socialists and communists in Spain during that country's civil war that raged from 1936 to 1939. Given the sorry state of education in the US and the watering down of Black history, no one should be embarrassed that that fact is unknown to them. Although if one looks hard enough, this chapter in Hughes' life can even be found in a Facebook post. Hughes reported on the war for a Black newspaper, the Baltimore Afro-American, which means that Black people all over the country knew that Hughes and Paul Robeson and others were in solidarity with a socialist fight against fascism. Thanks to Hughes and others during the days of Jim Crow segregation in what was considered a historical low point, Black readers around the nation knew about Black involvement in the Spanish Civil War. Yet today we are told that Black people should be unconcerned with what happens in the world because it isn't our fault that Donald Trump is president and white people are to blame for every calamity because they didn't vote for Kamala Harris.
Oh, God.
The Trump administration's surveillance state and its wars of aggression have been declared none of our business, and social media memes and videos elevate this idea that we should party and play without giving thought to events in the wider world because they are now said to have nothing to do with us.
Which is by design.
Right. Who are the Black thought leaders now that the U.S. state grows more openly fascistic by the day? While
Kevin
we are
Hart?
exhorted to ignore... What?
being stupid. I was just like, Kevin Hart? Black thought leader, Kevin Hart? Fucking... Anyway.
While we are exhorted to ignore domestic and international events happening around us, the duopoly parties give support to this latest war that violates the Nuremberg Charter's crimes against peace. Who is the Kwame Ture of this day? Where are the radical voices that can provide guidance and analysis at this critical juncture in history? The late Jesse Jackson gave voice to the struggles of the Palestinian cause and to the Cuban Revolution and to the fight against South African apartheid, but even at his funeral, former presidents Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden were in attendance. They were among those people who Jackson's actions Jackson publicly opposed and who, in successive administrations, built a bipartisan consensus for imperialism abroad and neoliberalism at home. There was a time when Touré's name was a household word, and his politics were shared by the masses of Black people. He was a national organizer of the All African People's Revolutionary Party in the U.S. Now, Black radical history is all but forgotten when it's most needed. While employment and mass incarceration climb, so does the bailing out of banks, billionaires, and the military-industrial complex. While gentrification rages communities and artificial intelligence steals jobs, the people who are elevated as cultural and political leaders either have nothing to say or have chosen to censor themselves. Voices that can connect the dots between what is now called the Epstein class, imperialism, capitalism, and a democracy, which is anything but democratic, are very badly needed. Of course, it is not coincidental that the Black left have been largely silenced at this moment. The 50-year-long counter-revolution has done its job quite well. So much so that even after the hated Trump sent federal troops into Washington, D.C. and Chicago and Memphis to practice racial profiling on Black people, the "it's none of our business" crowd still had nothing to say. We have gone from a Black radical tradition to silence, even when Black people are specifically targeted. Even worse, the latest war of aggression against Iran is treated as theater. A now viral video shows the young Black women in uniform dancing to a hip-hop tune with a graphic just touchdown in Iran, as if going off to a legal war is just another online influencer hustle. How can young people be better educated when years of endless war propaganda have normalized what was once rejected? Kwame Ture attended Howard University and HBCU that played a formative role in his political education. Kwame Nkrumah, president of Ghana, till he was disposed by a U.S.-backed coup, also attended at HBCU, Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. Now, Nkrumah might be called a tether who didn't deserve to be in the U.S. at all. If the Black radical tradition is not quickly revived, we will go down to destruction with the rest of a collapsing, failing society and not even know why we have been defeated. Confusion reigns because radical voices are still too few. The struggle, which will determine how and even when we survive the continuing onslaught, will depend on how well we have educated ourselves. The Black radical tradition is an essential part of that learning.
She's
So I'll just say
asking
this.
where these
God.
where these people are. It's where the original namesakes came from. Like, I mean, we're seeing that with African leaders now, and like in general, you know. But I mean, the whole
Right, but the problem,
Sahel states and stuff.
right, but the problem is now it's funny with social media how as connected as we are, we're, well, I would argue mostly
Yeah.
just the West and this country in particular, we're so
Yeah.
isolating that the idea that anyone in the global South has a better way of doing things, which is probably more in tune with the way that we used to do it, is considered nonsense. And I see this too in terms of like, especially online, like the black, if you can call it that, well, black influencers, they never mention like Kwame Ture or MLK or Malcolm X. It's just basically like the vote blue who matter who crowd who will shame you,
Yeah.
like for not voting for black politicians uncritically. Or the other flip of it, it's like Black MAGA, who basically, which I call, we had Dwayne Wan on the show back in the summer, who basically called them digital white people in digital blackface.
Yeah.
Who, you know, who would call people non-black, well, non-African Americans, so me and others, like terrorists or whatever else, who are coming over here trying to steal their jobs, trying to steal their money and all that kind of stuff. Like, and I think really it's that the idea that we're not educated at all in terms of who our thought leaders were, what they stand for, and how we can, you know, build upon. Like, and I've said this many times, is that I think we're trying to reinvent the wheel right now, and like, what can we do that's different? And it's like, I don't think we necessarily need to do anything that's radically different. I think it's just the argument of learning from the people who did it before and essentially remixing it into something that works for today. I think that's the start, at least.
Yeah.
But we're not even willing to do that. It's just the idea of like, people are willing to work twice as hard to try and get the same result, when it's like, you have people who've been doing this for centuries that you could be learning from. But which I think was the difference back then, is because resources were almost non-existent, but somehow people were able to connect and get the resources that they needed. Now
Yeah.
the resources ironically are out in the open somewhat.
Well, see, that's been partially the problem, where you have like, I think it was much easier to find actual factual information then. I feel like it's much harder just because they drown everything out now. You know,
Well, they drown everything out, and it's like everything is faked. With AI, it's fake.
Yeah, you can't trust shit.
And people just watch social media, especially, and just anything you see, you just take. You just accept it for what it is, which you shouldn't do that. You always should question, like, who's saying this, why they're saying it, and what context they're saying it, all the things, but we don't have that, you know, that type of education and that kind of critical thinking to kind of think through all of that.
You fill the rest with propaganda, keep people on an economic level to where they don't have access to the type of higher education that would help them. You make sure that their only ways out of the society is through what again? Like, you know, you can use it to travel the world and get a college education, and, you know, like, it'll give you a 6-figure job if you make it to this rank, and, you know, we'll give you a house and a free Mustang while we're at it. Like,
I think the other thing, especially with our Black radical leaders back in the day, what they did, they traveled. They went out of the country, or they went out of Europe into like the global South, and being able, not even, but like being able, which you would think again with social media, you're able to see what's going on, and like, and yet people are still kind of blind to the realities of people in other cultures or whatever, which is wild to me. But So speaking of that, I believe I played this part maybe a few weeks ago when I featured Paul Robeson on the show during last month. But I thought this was important, which I think kind of speaks into why the Black radical tradition is important, and I think especially in terms of the country. So this was an interview that he did, I believe it was on a radio show in 1958. But here he was talking about how, in his travels as a musician, actor, like he was able to connect with the working class, primarily in Europe, at least he was saying here. And he was able to identify, or they were able to identify with the struggle that he had as a Black man, is similar to the struggles of the working class, not always Black, but like the working class in general, that our struggles and oppression were intertwined. So yeah, let's play. I think it's about 3 minutes from the from that. So we'll play that.
Well, tell me, Mr. Robeson, was your commitment to the political scene then largely as a result of your feeling about your own people, or our own people, let's put it? Or did it have other overtones of political conviction?
First, it starts as an American Negro interested in my own people. The other great change is very constant in my mind. I was in the Welsh Valley, and the Welsh people sing very much like we do in the Negro people.
Yes, I've heard
many of our songs, beautiful songs. And I was one of the few outsiders who has sung at a Welsh Eisteddfod, their national festival, which has gone on since the time of the Druids. And I went down in the mines with the workers, and they explained to me that, Paul, you may be successful here in England, but your people suffer like ours. We are poor people, and you belong to us. You don't belong to the bigwigs here in this country. And so I today feel as much at home in the Welsh Valley as I would in my own Negro section, any city in the United States. And I just did a broadcast by transatlantic cable to the Welsh Valley a few weeks ago. And here was the first understanding that the struggle of the Negro people, or of any people, cannot be by itself, that it is a human struggle. And so I was attracted then to met many members of the Labour Party, and my politics embraced also the common struggle of all oppressed peoples, including especially the working masses, specifically the laboring people of all the world. And that defines my philosophy. It's a joining one of, we are a working people, a laboring people, the Negro people. And there is a unity between our struggle and those of white workers in the South. I've had white workers shake my hand and say, Paul, we're fighting for the same thing. And so this defines my attitude toward socialism and toward many other things in the world. I do not believe that a few people should control the wealth of any land, that it should be a collective ownership in the interest of all.
Is that a democratic socialism, or?
I would have to be a democratic socialism. There are many ways, however, to struggle toward democracy, as I see that in a place like China, for example, today, the Soviet Union, many other places, or take our own problems of Negroes. If we were free in the South tomorrow to carry our weight, to vote and to everything, would we now look around and try to find the 10 billionaires among our people? Would we attempt to build them up, or would we try to answer the needs of the great millions of our people? And so I see other ways of life, socialism, as trying to solve the problems of millions and tens of millions of peoples at once, in a way, instead of we would start from the individual to the masses, they start from the masses this way. Now, there are two ways, and there are difficulties each way. I have made the decision to join in a collective struggle, and the reason that my personal sacrifices mean very little in the struggle, in one way, when you see the children at Little Rock, what does not giving a few concerts mean, if you can make some other contribution?
Yeah, I think, to me, how he kind of is representative of the Black radical tradition is understanding who he was and his history as a Black man, and like the weight of what that meant to him being an African American in this country, but not just keeping it there, but kind of broadening out to the collective in terms of who else was struggling with among people who did not look like him, and being able to make those connections in terms of, yeah, we might be different in terms of race, maybe, but we share the same struggle in terms of, especially given the economic stance, we share in the same struggle. And I
Yeah.
think that's why Black radicals were important. It was, and I would argue that many of our Black forefathers really kind of tailored their messaging to Black people specifically. It was really about them. But you see the Black Panther, but a lot of that messaging,
Like
even if it's for Black people,
Huey
like
P.
really
and
expanded out to
Fred Hampton, the same kind of messaging.
Right.
You know?
But that expanded into the workforce. And that was everybody,
Right.
Who was oppressed. So, and just even looking at Langston Hughes, because I did, because I had my students kind of looked at him, for a presentation that we did last month. But like even in his poems, yeah, he tailored it to Black people, obviously, but the themes that he kind of goes into are very universal in the idea of oppression and freedom, which is something that we all strive for. So I think that's kind of why the Black radical tradition was targeted in this country in particular, because it wasn't necessarily just the voice for specifically Black people. It was the voice for everyone. And that's not favorable to a capitalist system.
Well, and what happens when it's not favorable to that system?
Right. So this is kind of why, as I think this is a follower of mine that I saw actually maybe 2 days ago, said on Twitter, Shay Hamilton, what's sad is our Black left radical leaders was destroyed by this center government and compromised what was left of the Black movement so much that now the entire Black bourgeoisie have completely sold out to white supremacist imperialist Democrats for cheap. I wouldn't even argue for cheap. I'll argue some do it for nothing.
Right.
But it's just the idea of like being adjacent to power, not even having real power, but being adjacent to it is more than enough when, they don't get anything necessarily out of it. It's just, I just get to tell the Negroes off and chide them for not necessarily supporting the candidate who, by color, maybe looks like them or it seemingly representative of them, but as Ruha Benjamin said, once upon a time, and I'm paraphrasing, your skin color is not in itself trustworthy if you are a slave to the empire. So I think that's what the Black radical tradition represented in terms of the messaging was very specifically Black, but the universality of it extended to everybody, which was not favorable in a capitalist system as ours.
Yep.
Capitalism.
I mean, I feel like that I could just start each segment, press that button, and leave, and it would pretty much be enough. Like, be like, what happened this week? Capitalism,
Yeah.
Like, anyway.
So, talking about sides of this, shout out to Margaret for writing.
Speaking of capitalism,
I just felt like this was just kind of getting our feet wet. Maybe I think we can get a little deeper into this another time. But doing articles and stories like these are why we are not pushed that much in the algorithm. So if you want to support us, and especially if you resonate with this idea of, do you think that Black radical tradition in some ways speaks to the universality of oppression of people as a whole? And what, in your opinion, do you think we can do in order to bring aspects of that tradition back into our current era that is not bound up by celebrity or money or all the things that potentially could undermine said movement? Let us know in the comments, especially if you're watching it as a clip. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please share the content so to fight the suppression that we are seeing on YouTube. Although I feel like right now they're not suppressing us as much as they used to, but we're still so much shadow banned. So,
Right.
and as we said earlier, I think we're about 170 subs from Free K. So we hope to hit that very soon. And thank you for watching.
So, yeah, our sub numbers have been doing well, actually.
Yes. So thank you guys for that. So let's see what you have to say in the chat. And again, shout out to Jax for the $5 that she sent at the beginning of the show. Let's see. This is from Bad Cookies. Shout out to you. But the Jews that wrote my history books told me you can summarize all of Black history into one month, all that, and they fit it in Valentine's Day. I mean, also Bad Cookies. Kamala would have kept laundering money for Ukraine, and Kamala's husband was on the Epstein list. She was compromised too, and Israel still would have started this crap.
Yep.
Also from Bad Cookies, who needs Malcolm X when you got Jesse Jackson? Who needs MLK when you got Richie Torres?
Yep.
Who needs Kwame Ture when you got Oprah Winfrey? So also from Bad Cookies, this was done by white capitalists that wanted to keep making a fortune off the back of black folk. They do the same thing with immigrants, but you guys have been having it bad far, far longer. Also from Bad Cookies, oh, you're on a tear tonight. We're all still slaves to the empire. Right now, the empire is on the verge of collapse, but it had nothing to do with the protests of Americans nationwide. Totally agree with everything you said there, for the most part. So, yeah. So basically, long story short, African American history is our history, and well worth studying if we want to understand or learn about the potential of what true liberation looks like, in my opinion. So it could be worth studying some of these people and seeing what they're saying so that you can clap back at some of the people who can tell you otherwise. Which honestly, I think for me personally, I need to start doing that more in my own free time. But that's why I have to show, so I'm able to at least.
I gotta do one of these days on one of our historical lookbacks. We need to do like a Huey P night. You do regular Huey P, and I'll do Huey P long. You know, so that one might be an interesting thing to do. So, you know about Huey P. Long? Have you looked up? Like,
yeah.
I mean, classically assassinated in Louisiana. There's a bridge there named after him. But, he used to have like share your wealth clubs and stuff. Like he yelled at Eisenhower or FDR to like, because the New Deal didn't do shit. And he was like, well, we clearly need this, and this, and this. And like that second New Deal or whatever was a lot of Huey P's ideas, you know? So, but, very interesting cat. So, and like, you know, plus fun mafia connections, and can't talk about U.S. politicians without talking about corruption, can we? Like, it's kind of the same thing. So anyway, speaking of, let's get to our next one. So, Collin, we're in for the like sci-fi thriller this evening. You know, we put on Hammer Horror, and instead of It Came From Space, we now have like fucking the Havana Syndrome. Like, fucking, I feel like we're literally in the fucking Twilight Zone most of the time. This is the level of script writing they do for PsyOps these days. So, but a lot of stuff's happening around Cuba, correct? Especially recently. So, Alan McLeod writes, the return of Havana Syndrome as Cuba faces renewed U.S. pressure campaign. So, you heard about Havana Syndrome before, Collin?
Yes.
So I played this evening during our pre-playlist a song by Jesse Jett called Echosphere, where he literally includes in the song the sound that supposedly causes Havana Syndrome. That is sampled in that piece. You're welcome to go check it out. But just in case people thought it was still dangerous or whatever, it's this fucking nonsense propaganda. But Alan writes, as the Trump administration turns the screw on Cuba in an attempt at regime change, media are showed renewed interest in Havana Syndrome, the desecrated theory that U.S. officials and secret agents are being targeted by a heretofore unknown directed energy weapon, making them sick. CBS News' flagship political affairs show 60 Minutes aired another special on Havana Syndrome Sunday. The episode concentrated on profiling supposed victims of the mystery ailment and claimed that U.S. government had purchased a directed energy weapon from a, quote, Russian criminal network, and that they had begun testing this weapon on animals. Again, I feel like science fiction has better... Like, this is a Twilight Zone episode, I think. You know? So, the show claimed that hundreds of American officials have been targeted by U.S. adversaries, yet the government remains reluctant to even look into the matter properly. CBS claims were picked up and amplified across the press, including by The Hill, MSN, New York Post, Newsmax, AOL, and The Telegraph. So, they're all pulling this. The first reported illness happened in Havana in 2016, and since has spread all over the world. U.S. officials, few of whom are willing to go on the record, report a wide variety of symptoms, including headaches, dizziness, and nausea. Many people believe they have been targeted by a futuristic microwave ray or sound cannon, or just ate the bad shrimp cocktail. One of the two. Like... Right. You know, isn't this all the headaches, dizziness, nausea, heartburn? Isn't this the Pepto song? You know?
Yes.
Just making sure that's what we're at. All right. Successive head on, applied directly to the forehead. Successive official and academic studies have cast doubt on the validity of these claims. And when the AP published recordings of the, quote, sonic weapon, American servicemen stationed in Havana gave them a far more mundane culprit was identified. Crickets. Literally crickets. The sound was unmistakably the high-pitched screeching mating call of the short-tailed cricket. The incident provoked uproars of laughter on Cuba. The Cuban Academy of Sciences later concluded that the idea of a microwave attack was not scientifically acceptable in any of its components, which is the nice way of saying y'all ain't no shit. Like, and has survived largely because of sensationalist media coverage and a biased use of science. Nevertheless, corporate media is once again reviving the idea of Havana Syndrome, and a highly opportune time in U.S.-Cuba relations. The Trump administration has launched an all-out campaign against Cuba, aiming for regime change on the island. On February 25th, a Florida-registered boat full of named Cuban Americans entered Cuban waters. Their intent was to land and carry out attacks on the island when they were interrupted by the Cuban Coast Guard. They fired upon the boat, but were overpowered. 4 of their number died in the failed operations, and 6 more were wounded. Cuban authorities published images of assault rifles, explosive devices, bulletproof vests, telescopic sights, and camouflage uniforms they seized. At the same time, President Trump has significantly tightened the blockade around the island, cutting off international trade and punishing entities continuing to do business with Havana. He announced that any country sending oil to Cuba would be punished with a 10% increase in tariffs. As a result, the Cuban economy has floundered. The country is highly dependent on oil imports for electricity production, and prolonged blackouts are now an everyday occurrence. Cuba is facing a critical shortage of fuel and necessary goods, such as medical supplies. Solidarity activists from around the world are rushing to attempt to make up the shortfall. U.S. sanctions official documents admit are designed to bring about hunger, desperation, and overthrow of government through economic dissatisfaction and hardship. Cuba is going to fail soon, Trump told CNN last week. Trump has forced countries around the region to cut off their healthcare partnerships with Cuba. Cuban doctors have been told to leave a dozen Caribbean and Central American nations, much to the detriment of their local populations who rely on them for medical treatment. More than 605,000 Cuban healthcare professionals have provided free healthcare in 165 countries, performing around 17 million surgeries and saving an estimated 12 million lives. So, yeah. The U.S. has sought to overthrow the Cuban government since the revolution of 1959, which brought Fidel Castro and the communist movement to power. Local authorities have documented at least 5,000 separate U.S.-backed terrorist attacks against their country, killing more than 3,400 people and leaving thousands more injured or disabled. Perhaps the most notable of these was the 1981 dengue fever epidemic, where the U.S. introduced the deadly disease to the island as a form of biological warfare. 158 people were killed, including 101 children. Is that in y'all's history books anywhere? Y'all remember reading about that? Nope. Thus, the return of Havana syndrome story comes at a highly convenient time for war planners in Washington, busy as they are attempting to foment regime change on the island 90 miles south of Miami. Another reason to be skeptical of this particular narrative is that it is based upon testimonies of U.S. officials working in orgs whose job it is to plant false information into the public domain. Moreover, many of the national security state mandarins who provide the backbone of the allegations insist on remaining anonymous, despite the lack of danger to themselves. No weapon has ever been found, no perpetrators identified, and it is difficult to see why America's adversaries would go to such trouble to mildly to moderately inconvenience its agents. Moreover, some experts question the plausibility of the science behind the claims. Nobody has detected microwaves, acoustic waves, etc. that could cause the symptoms. The issue is not resolved, nor it is likely to be unless more information is forthcoming. Kenneth Foster, Professor Emeritus of Bioengineering at the University of Pennsylvania, told Mint Press in 2021, adding, "I have been unable to come up with a plausible exposure scenario where pulsed microwaves could produce the reported effect. So far, more than 300 people around the world have reported symptoms, and it is beyond belief that someone could be beaming microwaves at them at sufficient intensity to produce effects without it being noticed." Some have drawn parallels between Havana syndrome and the, quote, yellow rain phenomenon of the 1980s. While patrolling in the area, U.S. forces in Southeast Asia noticed a yellow substance on leaves. Immediately fearing the worst, they suspected they had been attacked by chemical weapons, even though no casualties were recorded. State Department officials promoted the idea, formally accusing the Soviet Union of supplying weapons of mass destruction to communist forces in the region. The story became a national scandal, lasting for much of the early 1980s, only for the U.S. to admit years later that the yellow substance on the leaves was actually honeybee feces.
Yeah.
Straight honeybee poo-poo. So, CBS News' own ties with the national security state should also not be ignored. Last year, the Ellison family took over the network in what would be the first piece of major media empire that now includes CNN and TikTok. Again, Larry Ellison, Oracle, we've talked about this ad nauseum before. For some time, the CIA was Oracle's only customer until it began branching out and winning contracts with other departments of the national security state. And, I mean, the CIA awarded Oracle a slice of a multi-billion-dollar cloud computing contract. 2 years later, it won a $9 billion contract with the Department of Defense to provide weapon systems. So Trump and Larry Ellison, right? That's the whole thing right now, too. You know, Trump said, calling him a great guy. That Larry Ellison, people tell me he's very good. So, and what happened? What happened to Ellison quickly turned CBS News into an overly pro-Trump outlet, installing prominent, quote, anti-woke crusader Barry Weiss. So, of course, they're going to talk about this Havana syndrome. Thoughts so far, Gabriel? What you got?
I mean, Cuba's kind of tricky, given its history with the U.S. And, you know, people aren't monoliths. Like, I know Cubans who feel very strongly, you know, against sanctions on the country, but I know others who, you know, mostly who are in the diaspora who might feel differently, you know, in terms of, you know, the socialism / communism that still somewhat exists on the island.
There's a word for those. I think they call them a thing.
Yes.
So,
but I can appreciate the nuance in that regard, in a sense. That being said, the way that Trump has kind of described taking over Cuba, like kind of like a rapey, like I can take it and do whatever I want to do with it. Like, that in of itself, I have a problem with. And I think honestly, I think it's in a way kind of showing how, in my personal opinion, how terrified in a way the US is with Cuba, because they've been under sanctions for what? Like, what, 60 years at least? About?
Something like that.
And yet, like, they have better medical facilities than we do. They have better education than we do. Like, they've been able to, not to say they're great, but like the idea, like, even I know people on the Caribbean islands who will go to study in Cuba because
it's just
like,
better medical fucking like
exactly
schools.
Like, right. You know, like that should tell you something. So I honestly think there is some fear in that, in terms of, oh, look, here is this socialist / communist island that's doing very well and somewhat well for themselves despite the sanctions. And God forbid that people go there or kind of see what they're doing and then kind of comparing, well, why is it that the US is shit in comparison to that? I think that's kind of low key the issue, is Cuba is sizing up the US given its sanctions, and US doesn't want to be played like that. So they'll rather just kind of take it over and like make it what they're trying to do with Iran right now, a failed state. Like, that's, you know, that's kind of what they want to do with it. And, you know, and obviously steal their resources, the little that they have, and like go on their merry way. But you're smiling. Like,
just cat fucking anyway.
So yeah, to me, that's kind of what I kind of get from this. It's just more of, they don't want to be shown up by an island that, in all intents and purposes, by several metrics, are doing much better than they are. And now with social media, and especially since people are going, they're seeing this and like start asking questions, and you know, like, can't have that.
Nope.
So
Nope, can't have that shit, can we? So, which media then swoops in, does their job, like, I don't know if you've seen what's happening down there, right? Especially with the earthquake that just happened. Like, did you know this? That Cuba had like a earthquake? Like, okay. So, as Cuba electrical grid failed, which is partially because of this oil embargo, right? Almost entirely because of this oil embargo. Much of the U.S. corporate media is reporting on the grid's collapses, leaving two key details out of the story, which this is from Arturo Dominguez, right? So links are in the doobly-doo, as always. So the U.S. is using collective punishment as starvation as weapons, which led to island-wide blackouts. I wonder where they learned that. I wonder who taught them that. As the situation in Cuba deteriorates and much of the corporate media glosses over the root cause of the problem if they report on it at all, the Cuban government is reporting more critical issues beginning to rise. So, shortly after the oil embargo began, there were reports about at-risk groups such as pregnant women, children under the age of one who need special care, special needs children of every age, and the elderly who are in danger due to blackouts. Now, remember what you were saying about Cuba being a big, like, medical hub, right? Like a bunch of, medical schools there, right? So the situation has grown more dire as the Cuban government reported that tens of thousands have had surgeries postponed and that thousands of dialysis patients are at serious risk of death without access to their treatments. Like, we have to explain this, apparently, to, like you are killing people actively. Right. So, according to the Cuban government, there are 57 dialysis units in the country, serving more than 3,000 patients who require renal replacement therapy. The process for patients starts with a taxi that picks them up at their homes and takes them to treatment centers. That process, along with the movement of medical supplies and staff, is crippled by fuel shortages, but it doesn't end there. Prices for the most basic goods are spiking across the island as transport becomes more difficult and more expensive each day. I mean, go ask Jay Buffon what he's got used to have to do every day. Like, so, and I do believe he had on Arturo Dominguez recently, so probably worth going and watch that. So, the country is now failing into an intentionally deepening humanitarian threat knowingly created by Trump. The compounding efforts of it have forced hospitals to suspend services and schools and businesses to close. Shortages of gasoline and diesel have crippled the country's transport systems, food distribution networks, and even its diesel-powered water pumps. Cooking gas shortages also have having an impact across the island as food literally spoils in refrigerators. Like, meanwhile, Cuban-American hardliners in Congress have been vocal in support of Trump's collective punishment against the Cuban people. Florida Reps Carlos Jimenez, Maria Elvira Salazar, and Mario Diaz-Balart have applauded the efforts to inflict barbaric suffering and have pushed for even harsher punishment. Others, such as Rep. Mike Lawler, have praised Trump's unilateral actions, while many on both sides of the political aisle remain silent. Several Dems have denounced the measure and in support of lifting sanctions. Tim Kaine, Schiff, and Ruben Gallego introduced a war powers resolution to prevent the president from taking military action against Cuba. Markey, Warren, and McGovern demanded to end to crushing sanctions in February, just days after McGovern introduced the United States-Cuba Trade Act, a bill to repeal the economic embargo of Cuba. So, just for memory's sake, but America's had an embargo against Cuba for 60 years, and for 60 years we've been waiting for that embargo to do what politicians in Washington claim it will do. Deliver freedom and democracy to the people of Cuba. It has failed, said McGovern on February. It's time to throw away the old, obsolete, failed policies of the past and try something different. Let's focus on the people of Cuba and let's treat them like human beings who want to live their lives in dignity and freedom. the Cuban people, not politicians in Washington, on to decide their own leaders and their own future. Which that's always like, yeah, right after we fucking regime change them. They definitely, they should decide, not, well, it's like, okay. So the Reps Delia Ramirez and Yaida Velasquez introduced the new Good Neighbors Act, a bill that seeks to annul the Monroe Doctrine and replace it with a new good neighbor policy. Other Democrats who have spoken out, AOC, Omar, Chuy Garcia, and Madeline Dean. I doubt they've done very much in these regards, but, they at least will say the right things occasionally. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries as out of control in early January and warned against military intervention in Colombia, Greenland, and Cuba, but has been largely silent about the oil blockade. Cory Booker criticized both parties for ceding more power to the president while naming Cuba as a potential target. So, all the kabuki theater out of the way. New reports indicate the White House is seeking to handle Cuba like it did Venezuela. That is, dispose Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez and keep the current government in place, suggesting Trump may have sidelined Cuban-American hardliners while Cuba continues to recover from Hurricane Melissa in October, for which the U.S. offered little assistance. The already beleaguered nation can't withstand much more stress. Today, a 6-magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Guantanamo. So that's literally happened yesterday, I think.
Yes.
So with no movement in Congress regarding Cuba and with the news media ecosystem glossing over the case of the crisis, it's no wonder the public remains largely unaware of what the United States is doing to the island nation. Now, decades of anti-Cuban propaganda are being weaponized across social media to rationalize the harm being done by hardline U.S. policies that ignore human life to justify the killing of Cubans on the island as the world watches. So, yeah. Closing thoughts, Care Bear?
I mean, of course, it's the idea of we have to bring democracy, this person's a dictator. It's just the same. I get tired talking about it because it's like you think that they'll deviate from the script a little bit, and it's the same damn script, and no one catches up on the script. Thank you. It's the same damn script.
I'm telling you, dude.
Give us something. At least give us something new and original, please. But it's like, but I think, but at the same time, it's like it works. So why fix what's not broken? I guess.
Right. It's just fucking. Well, clearly, it's just microwaves being shot at us, Care Bear, that we're sick and tired. Being sick and tired of being sick and tired. Anyway, fucking, I just find this whole fucking, it's like, yep, we're gonna do the same thing again. Who's gonna stop us? Like, when's that gonna happen?
Right. But that's exactly the point. It's like, this is where Democrats, if they were truly the opposition, would say something. No. Look, I'll take the rhetoric at this point. Say something, but it's just like
highly illogical.
Right? They ain't saying shit.
No.
So it's like, and these are the people that we're essentially being coerced into voting for in the next 6 months. Yeah, I'm like, no. You would think that because it's Trump that they'll come a lot harder, but
no.
Yeah, the fact that as of now, I have not heard the GOP go after Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries in the same way that they did with Nancy Pelosi when she was speaker. The GOP hated Nancy. Now, we don't like her here, but at least she gave them a run of her money when she was lucid, I would say, like, but Hakeem and Chuck don't do shit. Like, they just, like, Republicans aren't afraid of them. Like, they don't say anything about them. They don't call them out on anything. So that should tell you something. Like, I think that almost kind of surprised us. Like, oh, the Democrats aren't even putting up, like, anything. So, yeah, it's just pathetic. But again, I think.
Hold it, sister.
But again, if it works and if the populace is dumb enough to go for it, then why change it?
Yep. Why change it? Keeps working. Don't fix what ain't broke. So, but anyway, talking about these sort of things is certainly why YouTube decided to demonetize us, then remonetize us, because they realized we were doing too well and they wanted some of our fucking money. They want to take that check from us. So if you don't want to pay the YouTube tax, go to code-v.com/Indie News Network, scan that QR code on your screen, or links are always in the doobly-doo down below. But if you can't do that, we get it. Like, subscribe, hit the share button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. What other side effects do you feel when you have Havana syndrome? Let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Heartburn, diarrhea, indigestion, high anxiety, plenty of options for you to go with. Links for Jesse Jet's Ecosphere is in the chat, both at Spotify and live on the channel. If you would like to go check that out. So anyway, Substack's going. Indy over on the Substack says Kwame Ture was amazing. Amazings. Yes. So anyway, that's it. That's all I see. Yeah. So I guess we should just head to our next one.
Yep. This will be a longer one, I guess. But I think this is also probably our trending story of the night. So let's get into it. So as I just said, probably our big story for this episode, and probably what people have been talking about the most on independent media, is this guy. This guy, those of you who may not know, is Joe Kent. He was the former National Counterterrorist Center director, who resigned yesterday because basically he was like, I can't stand by what the U.S. is doing in Iran, given that Israel basically told us to go ahead and nuke them. So,
yep.
So seemingly he comes off as a man of conscience to actually resign. So, so shout out to Brett Wilkins, who was at Common Dreams. He kind of goes into it a little bit, like it gives a basic account of what happened yesterday. So he writes, Iran posed no imminent threat. That's the title of the segment. Trump's counterterrorism director resigns in protest. I cannot support sending the next generation off to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people, the far-right former Navy, Army Ranger, and CIA officer said. So Brett continues. National Counterterrorism Center Director Joe Kent announced his resignation yesterday, as of today, Tuesday, accusing President Donald Trump of being manipulated by Israel into launching a war on Iran. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. Kent, a former Army Ranger and CIA paramilitary officer often described as a white nationalist and conspiracy theorist, wrote in his resignation letter to Trump. Early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your American First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage war with Iran continued. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States, and that should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie, and it's the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women, he claimed. While there's no solid evidence that Israel drew the U.S. under then President George W. Bush into invading Iraq and toppling longtime dictator and erstwhile U.S. ally Saddam Hussein, then Israeli opposition leader Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in 2008 that the September 11, 2001 attacks on the United States, which Iraq had nothing to do with, were benefiting Israel. He also said 2 years later that America is a thing you can move very easily, move it in the right direction. Kent, whose first wife, Navy intelligence officer Shannon Smith, was killed in a 2019 bombing targeting U.S. forces invading Syria, said that I cannot support sending the next generation off to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people, nor justifies the cost of American lives, said Kent. I guess I missed a word there. I pray that you will reflect on what we are doing in Iran and who are we doing it for, he told the president. Trump decided to attack Iran despite Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard testifying before Congress last year that it is not building a nuclear weapon, and that the late Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who was assassinated last month by an Israeli strike, has not authorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003. U.S. intelligence agencies have repeatedly come to the same conclusion since the George W. Bush administration. Kent, who has been a staunch Trump loyalist, is the most prominent U.S. official to resign as the president, who infamously campaigned for a re-election on a promise of no new wars, has attacked 7 countries since returning to the White House and 10 over the course of his 2 terms. In contrast to his vehement opposition to waging war on Iran, Kent led an effort to rewrite intelligence so it did not clash with Trump's dubious claim that the government of Venezuela was involved with the Tren de Agua drug trafficking gang ahead of the recent U.S. invasion of the South American country and kidnapping of its president, Nicolas Maduro. While Kent's resignation drew praise from many opponents of Trump's illegal U.S.-Israeli war of choice in Iran, others focused on his troubling record and associations. So here's one. Actually, I'm going to zoom in here. So this is from Ryan Goodman from Blue Sky, who wrote, Iran war was a bad idea from the start, but Joe Kent is not the right messenger on this. See his alleged associations with Nick Fuentes, a live streamer who said Hitler was a complicated historical figure which many people misunderstand. So in this letter, I'm not going to read all of it for time. Can you zoom in, please?
That's zoomed.
All right. You know what? I'm going to zoom in on my screen. Maybe. Actually, that's fine. So not going to read all of it, but I'll read some part on the top. Mr. Kemp described Islam as based on conquest at its core. In other comments, he has conflated support for Palestine human rights with the support for the terrorist group Hamas, smearing political figures as pro-Hamas. Given Mr. Kent's stated intent to prioritize Islamic terrorism as NCTC director, this Islamophobic bigotry is especially concerning, especially because the United States intelligence community has a long history of warrantless surveillance and civil rights violations targeting Arab and Muslim Americans. The NCTC director must be an individual who can be trusted to uphold the civil rights and liberties of all Americans, including Muslim and Arab Americans. Mr. Kent is not that person. Mr. Kent cannot be relied upon to appropriately assess and act on international far-right hate and extremism as director of the NCTC, given his associations with the movement here in the U.S. Mr. Kent participated in a call discussion campaign social media strategy with white nationalists and anti-Semite Mick Fuentes. Kent also criticized Twitter's move to deplatform Fuentes, tagging him in a Twitter post. In July 2022, Mr. Kent gave an interview to Grayson Arnold, a large streamer who once referred to Hitler as a complicated historical figure, which many people misunderstand. In both cases, Mr. Kent disavowed the figures and claimed he did not know who they were prior to interaction with them. Okay, so I'm not. That's it. That's enough. So the guy's a dick. For all intents and purposes. So I can argue I can give worse names than that. But sorry, dude. Like, I'm sorry. He's like, oh, I didn't know who they were before I went on their shows. Like, really?
Yeah, bullshit. Yeah, we know. Like,
you're the counter-terrorist director, and you don't know who Nick Fuente is? Like, the other guy, I didn't know. But, like, you should know. Like, given your position.
Somebody in your team should definitely know. You know,
unless like I feel like in certain cases, some some of these teams behind the scenes like put them on these shows like on purpose to like essentially like have them have a hard time. But all the same, I think that's bullshit that he had no idea who these people were, or at least if you hadn't, like you can at least push back on the stuff that they're saying. Now, granted, I hadn't seen any of the interviews and I don't care to, but I don't think Kent like push back at all in terms of anything that he said if he was somewhat half decent. Anyway, let's move on. Joe Kent isn't suddenly a good guy. Former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger said on X, he's a straight-up white nationalist, but there are fissures in the MAGA base. Midas Touch News CEO Ron Klipkowski also took to social media writing, just for the record, I'm glad Joe Kent's resigned, but he's still a POS. So, any thoughts before I move on? We'll get into the meat.
Nah, I've got some more later, but I'll save up my rant.
Okay. All right. So, shout out to the Dissident, friend to the show. He wrote this article on Substack. He gets into a little bit more info that Brett did not share, so I figured we might as well get into the meat of it.
Yeah, because Brett said what there was no credible evidence that Israel put, drew George W. Bush. I was like, all right, dude, are you sure? Are you sure about that? Like, so are you sure it's not credible? Like, anyway, continue.
Right, you're welcome to come on the show and have your say on that. He's been on the show twice before, guys, so you can actually check the interviews we did with him in the playlist. But shout out to the Dissident for, I think giving a little more meat, where he titles the article, Joe Kent has a point about the Israeli role in the wars in Iraq and Syria. Joe Kent has been attacked for implying that the U.S. wars in Iraq and Syria were for Israel, but he has a point. What is the point? He will get into it. While the Israeli role in pushing and lobbying for the current war in Iran is out in the open, Kent sparked more controversy for his stating in his resignation letter that Israel lies about Iran were the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women, and for writing that he lost my beloved wife Shannon in a war manufactured by Israel, in reference to his late wife Shannon Kent losing her life in an ISIS attack after being deployed to northeast Syria in 2018. These lines have caused controversy. Vox writer Zach Beauchamp, for example, wrote that the 2003 invasion of Iraq was, in its telling, not the result of U.S. intelligence failures or post 9/11 rage or even neoconservative hubris. Rather, he says, it was a result of an Israeli lie. What exactly that lie was is never explained. And even more bizarrely, he describes the tragic death of his wife Shannon in the 2019 ISIS suicide bombing as part of a war manufactured by Israel. But Kent, in reality, has a point about the U.S. wars in Iraq and Syria having Zionist motives behind them. What do you mean? The Israeli role in selling the Iraq war was not as out in the open as its role in selling the current war with Iran, but it was just as prevalent. Years before their role in the Bush administration, many of the architects of that war, Donald Rumsfeld advisor Richard Perle, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Douglas Feith, and Middle East advisor to Dick Cheney David Wurmser, advocated a regime change war in Iraq explicitly for the benefit of Israel. In 1996, Perle, Feith, and Swermer wrote a letter to the newly elected Benjamin Netanyahu titled A Clean Break, A New Strategy for Securing the Realm, which was essentially the blueprint for the Greater Israel Project, advocating that Israel abandon the prospect of a two-state solution and instead take out governments in the region sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, adding that this effort can focus on removing Saddam Hussein from power in Iraq, an important Israeli strategic objective in its own right. Perle, Feith, and Wurmser years later got key positions in the Bush administration, and they were the lead architects behind the war they openly described as an important Israeli strategic objective. In their detailed study on the Israel lobby, political scientists John Mershimer and Steve Walt wrote that Douglas Feith, the lead author of Clean Break document, is deeply committed to Israel. He also has long terms tied to Likud. He wrote articles in the 1990s supporting the settlements and arguing that Israel should retain the occupied territories, adding that the Haaretz columnist Akava Eldar warned that Feith and Perle are walking a fine line between their loyalty to American governments and Israeli interests. Israel also played a major role in selling the Iraq WMD deception used to justify the Iraq War. A number of Israeli politicians repeated the claim of WMDs in the American media and in testimonies. As Mershimer and Walt documented, Israeli leaders were deeply distressed when Bush decided to seek Security Council authorization for war, and even more worried when Saddam agreed to let UN inspectors back in. The campaign against Saddam Hussein is a must, Shimon Peres told reporters in September 2002. Inspections and inspectors are good for decent people, but dishonest people can overcome easily inspections and inspectors. At the same time, Ehud Barak wrote in the New York Times op-ed warning that the greatest risk now lies in inaction. His predecessor as Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, published in a similar piece in the Wall Street Journal entitled The Case for Toppling Saddam, "Today, nothing less than dismantling his regime will do," he declared. "I believe I speak for the overwhelming majority of Israelis in supporting a preemptive strike against Saddam's regime." Or, as Haaretz reported in February 2003, the military and political leadership yearns for war with Iraq. Israeli intelligence similarly played a large role in cooking up the WMD hoax used to justify the Iraq War. CBS News reported in 2002 that Israel is urging U.S. officials not to delay a military strike against Iraq's Saddam Hussein, an aide to Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said Friday. Israeli intelligence officials have gathered evidence that Iraq is speeding up efforts to produce biological and chemical weapons, said Sharon aide Renan Gisson. Any postponement of an attack on Iraq at this stage would serve no purpose, Gisson said. It will only give him more of an opportunity to accelerate his program of weapons of mass destruction. In 2003, journalist Bob Dreyfus reported that a rump unit established in the office of Prime Minister Ariel Sharon of Israel prepared intelligence reports on Iraq in English, not Hebrew, and forwarded them to the Office of Special Plans. The Pentagon's Office of Special Plans, which was created to cook up the WMD deception, according to The Guardian, forged close ties to a parallel ad hoc intelligence operation inside Ariel Sharon's office in Israel, specifically to bypass Mossad and provide the Bush administration with more alarmist reports on Saddam's Iraq than Mossad was prepared to authorize. The Guardian added that the Israeli influence was revealed most clearly by a story floated by unnamed senior U.S. officials in the American press, suggesting the reason that no banned weapons had been found in Iraq was that they had been smuggled into Syria. Intelligence sources say that the story came from the office of the Israeli Prime Minister. The LA Times in 2005 reported that a former senior Israeli military intelligence official asserted Thursday that the nation's spy agencies were a full partner to the United States and Britain in producing flawed pre-war assessments of Iraq's ability to mount attacks with weapons of mass destruction, adding that a senior researcher at one of Israel's leading think tanks, the Jaffe Center for Strategic Studies at Tel Aviv University, said intelligence produced by Israel played a significant role in augmenting the case for toppling Hussein. Furthermore, the Israeli lobby also played a role in pushing for the Iraq War. John Mearsheimer and Steve Walt noted pressure from Israel and the lobby was not the only factor behind the decision to attack Iraq in March 2003, but it was critical, adding, leaders of the lobby's major organizations lent their voices to the campaign. As President Bush attempted to sell the war in Iraq, the Forward reported, America's most important Jewish organizations rallied as one to his defense. In statement after statement, community leaders stressed the need to rid the world of Saddam Hussein and his weapons of mass destruction. Mearsheimer later documented that 2 months before the war, AIPAC's executive director, Howard Kaur, said that quietly lobbying Congress to approve the use of force in Iraq was one of AIPAC's successes over the past year. U.S. Representative Jim Mormon said in 2007 that AIPAC has pushed the Iraq war from the beginning. I don't think they represent a mainstream of American Jewish thinking at all, but because they are so well organized and their members are so extraordinarily powerful, most of them quite wealthy, they've been able to exert power. Kent's most controversial statement in his resignation letter was that he wrote that he lost his beloved wife, Shannon, in a war manufactured by Israel, in reference to the fact that his wife was killed in an ISIS attack after being deployed to Syria in 2019. But again, Kent certainly has a point. The U.S. real motive for sending troops to northeast Syria was not fighting ISIS, but a small part of a larger dirty war designed to topple the Syrian government, a dirty war in which Israel played a large role. U.S. official Dana Scroll in 2019 explained the real motive for leaving U.S. troops in Syria, said that the U.S. was occupying the resource-rich economic powerhouse of Syria, so where the hydrocarbons are, the agricultural powerhouse, in order to impoverish government-held Syria and effect regime change. The U.S. regime change war in Syria was strongly supported by Israel due to the former Syrian government's ties to Iran and Hezbollah. In 2012, at the start of CIA regime change operations in Syria, then advisor to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Jake Sullivan, wrote, one particular source states that the British and French intelligence services believe that their Israeli counterparts are convinced that there is a positive side to the civil war in Syria. If the Assad regime topples, Iran would lose its only ally in the Middle East and would be isolated. At the same time, the fall of the House of Assad could well ignite a sectarian war in which the Shiites and the majority Sunnis of the region drawing in Iran, which, in the view of Israeli commanders, would not be a bad thing for Israel and its Western allies. In the opinion of this individual, such a scenario would distract and might obstruct Iran from its nuclear activities for a good deal of time. In addition, certain senior Israeli intelligence analysts believe that this turn of events may even prove to be a factor in the eventual fall of the current government of Iran. Another State Department cable from 2015, referring to regime change in Syria, wrote, Iran would be strategically isolated, unable to exert its influence in the Middle East. The resulting regime in Syria will see the United States as a friend, not an enemy. Washington would gain substantial recognition as fighting for the people in the Arab world, not the corrupt regimes. For Israel, the rationale for a bolt of the blue attack on Iran's nuclear facilities would be eased, and the new Syrian regime might well be open to early action or on the frozen peace talks with Israel. Hezbollah in Lebanon would be cut off from its Iranian sponsor, since Syria would no longer be a transit point for Iranian training, assistance, and missiles, adding, America can and should help them, Syrian rebels, by doing so help Israel. In other words, Shannon Kent was sent by the U.S. to Syria in the service of a long-standing regime change war that was strongly supported by Israel and which was carried out in the name of helping Israel. Furthermore, given that Sharon Kent was killed by ISIS attack in Syria, one cannot ignore Israel's apparent collaboration with ISIS in Syria. Journalist Max Blumenfeld documented in his book, The Management of Savagery, How America's National Security State Fueled the Rise of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Donald Trump, that at the Likud Party-linked Beijing Sadat Center for Strategic Studies, its director, Ephraim Imbar, promoted the Islamic State in Syria as a boon to Israel's strategic deterrence. In an op-ed entitled The Destruction of Islamic State is a Strategic Mistake, Imbar argued, the West should seek to further weakening of Islamic State, but not its destruction. Instead, he insisted, it should exploit ISIS as a useful tool in the fight against Israel's true enemy, Iran, and its proxy, Hezbollah, which operates on the Israeli frontiers from southern Lebanon. A weak ISIS is, counterintuitively, preferable to a destroyed ISIS, Imbar concluded. Imbar went on to argue that for prolonging the conflict in Syria for as long as possible on the grounds that extended sectarian bloodshed would produce positive change. While Israeli military honchos took satisfaction from the bloodshed of Syria's civil war, ISIS commanders tiptoed around the Israeli military. During a public forum in Israel, the ever-candid former Prime Minister of Defense, Yalon, revealed that an ISIS cell operating alongside the rebels in southern Syria had accidentally launched a mortar into Israeli-controlled territory. On most occasions, firing comes from regions under the control of the regime, Yalon commented. But once the firing came from ISIS positions, and it immediately apologized. Pushed by Israeli media to clarify his statement about ISIS formally apologizing to Israel and open admission of an Israeli back channel to the jihadists, Yalon refused further comment. Furthermore, the regime change program in Syria that was supported by Israel helped create the presence of ISIS in Syria. Journalist Seth Harp, in his book, The Fort Bragg Cartel, documented Washington's efforts to overthrow Assad, who, like Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi, was an outspoken and belligerent foe of Israel, redoubled amid the Arab Spring protests. One of the most expensive CIA programs in history, a billion-dollar fiasco codenamed Timber Sycamore, plowed thousands of tons of guns and ammo fresh from German and American factories into Syria in an effort to arm the Sunni portion of the population that had long chafed at the brutal and corrupt rule of the House of Assad. Arms traffickers working for the CIA also shipped stockpiles of seized weapons and munitions from the Libyan port of Benghazi to Syria, pouring accelerant onto the flames of a spreading civil war. Chief among the Sunni extremist groups that benefited from the instability in Syria and the flood of black market arms into the country was the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, known by the acronym ISIS. Referring to Timber Sycamore, U.S. official Phil Gordon admitted to journalist Charles Glass that the worst guys were the ones that would take and use the weapons. Glass noted that the weapons flow into Syria often ended up in the hands of ISIS and other radical jihadist groups, writing, the most extreme elements, the Al-Qaeda offshoots Jabhat al-Nusra and the Islamic State, not only used the weapons, but also advertised them in videos that included beheadings, the hurling of gay men off towers to their deaths, the murders of American journalists and British aid workers, and the rape of Yazidi women.
Which is who's in power now with Al-Jilani.
Right. On top of the fact that U.S. troops were sent to Syria to further the Israeli-supported regime change goal, the U.S. and Israel flooded Syria with weapons undoubtedly helped ISIS, the group that killed Shannon Kent, grow. Joe Kent is no doubt going to continue to be smeared over his comments regarding the Israeli role in the roles in Iraq and Syria, but he certainly has a good point. So that was a lot.
Yes.
And shout out to the Dissident for the very thorough history. But I know you have thoughts. So go off.
Well, it's one of those times where it's like they let a little bit out, you know? It's like if they attach it to a person that's clearly compromised and that idea is compromised, you know? Mm-hmm. That sort of thing, which we'll get into that in a second. But I mean, this dude's had multiple campaigns supported by Palantir or Peter Thiel, sorry. But, you know, among other issues. So he's definitely positioning for best advantage, you know. But I got a couple of tweets. So friend of the show, Fiorella, says, Trump and MAGA are collapsing before the world. Just remember that whatever BS new version of this that's newly shoved in your face next that will still push for war and surveillance, it's also not the answer. So I imagine this guy's being heavily pushed into, you know, running for office again as well. So,
right.
You know, that's a factor here. Wait. But go ahead.
Actually, go ahead what Indy says and then ahead what Indy said and then could share what I shared with you yesterday.
So Joe Kent resigned as director of counterterrorism because he admits Iran was not a threat, but of course he's also a neo-Nazi that doesn't want Americans to die for Israel, so naturally half the world is ignoring the Nazi part and praising him for his act of conscience, which may be just covering his ass for the Nuremberg 2 trials. Half the world is yelling good riddance, he's a neo-Nazi, and ignoring why he's claiming to walk, but also that the crowd is rapidly for expanding the attacks on Iran because something terrorism and human rights. Kent is also going to run for Congress and be another hard-right conservative. This feels very much like a play to win him favor and elevate him for a congressional seat.
See, here's what I was saying last night with you. And shout out to Indy for this was, I guess, a conversation you had with you in Discord, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's going to be easy for him to run for Congress now, given what he's saying about Israel and given the lobby.
I think there's a lane. There's clearly a lane that's forming that, like, you know, it's where the MTGs and the Thomas Masseys and the, like, you know, funded by like wellness company.
Right. It may not necessarily be in Congress, though. Like, you can make the argument that really at this point, MTG can do really whatever she wants. And she's saying right now, like, she won't run for office. That will remain to be seen.
Yeah,
she can very easily go into the media circuit too, which
right.
So I think I do agree. Well, while I'm still not certain whether he will run for Congress, what I will say is that they are, and he's taking on the role that MTG is doing, and maybe to some degree what Tucker Carlson is doing right now. They're obviously
same kind of
planning. They're obviously planning for a world post-Trump, where kind of what Trump did very well 10 years ago, moved to a more populist stance. To make themselves more viable for whatever it is, you know, down the road, and kind of hit on that, and then they can go back to their shitty ways afterward, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I think it's just kind of synonymous with the MAGA movement, essentially.
Yeah.
Seeing how shit Trump is and thinking of themselves in terms of, we can't be aligned with Trump in the same way, especially given how crazy he is, how can we set ourselves up for success moving forward in a world after him? So I could definitely see with Kent, like, he doesn't necessarily have to be in Congress. He could be like some sort of lobbyist or whatever. Like, he could still be involved in like the machine in some way, shape, or form, and still kind of keep to a lot of his neo-Nazi Christian nationalist views of why he was in in office to begin with. So I think he'll probably lay low for a bit, given some of the criticism that he's getting. I'm sure he's going to emerge.
I don't think he cares about the criticism, is my point.
Maybe
like,
not,
this is good publicity for him. They're running with it.
Right.
Like,
but the idea that even what I'm seeing in certain people with independent media is that, oh, he's a patriot, like, oh, he's a good guy.
Yeah, like, y'all don't know shit yet. Calm down. You don't know fucking nut. Y'all didn't even do a Google search. Fuck. Like, you've done zero of your actual due diligence necessary. You're just running on vibes and feels at this point. Like, I get you.
Just because a guy did the bare minimum, which I would argue, I wouldn't say it's the right thing to do, but at the same time, I'm like, you should have done this well over a year ago, honestly. Like,
and
you should have bounced from the jump, but you didn't. Like, you stuck with it for like over a year. Like, Trump was shit at the beginning. Like,
so
you only protected now for what, really? Like, because it was too much. Like, what was he doing for the past year? Wasn't too much for you. Like, so, but you also brought this from Dr. CBS.
Yep. So read this carefully. This dirtbag is no hero. He is not against war. He is not against U.S. imperialism or the troglodyte idiot currently at the helm. He is not against regime change or foreign interference. He simply does not support this particular blunder because the U.S. will not win. So he blames it on the vassal state. Stop giving these losers grace when they temporarily remove their brown shirt or fold their white shirt into a white flag. So, right in line with friend of the show, Marwa Osman, do not dress this up as some moral awakening worthy of praise. It isn't. This is the bare minimum. Someone's been listening to what I've been saying, Marwa. The absolute least you and so many others could do. Now, after this, sitting comfortably at home and calling it action is not enough, not even close. If you truly believe in what you're saying, then step outside your comfort zone and change your reality, your routine, your priorities, your role in all of this. Regime change in the U.S. now, says Marwa. Jesus.
Right.
But I mean, bare minimum positions are clearly not worth praise, as we continue to say on this show. So,
right.
Indy sent me this, which this was from. What's the actual 2 shakes of a. So this was like in the Times, I'm pretty sure. So take that for what it is. Yes. And they write, but in recent weeks, far-right figures led by Nick Fuentes, a white nationalist who was spoken admiring of Hitler, have started an online drumbeat claiming that Kent, a retired Green Beret and CIA paramilitary officer who had a fistful of Bronze Stars, is actually a deep state denizen himself. Well, CIA paramilitary officer, I think that isn't that not the deep state? Isn't that, once you get that 3-letter, once you,
right,
yes, that is, yes. Thank you. It's on the resume. Deep state denizen. That's right there. Special skills include fucking coup assassination attempts and you know what I mean? Anyway.
Right.
Ken's wife, Shannon. Go ahead.
Well, interesting in this last paragraph. I mean, we've read that several times. That's why I skipped over it because there's no report on it. After her death, he wrote about how his experiences in the special forces had made him more skeptical of pointless or unwinnable wars.
Yeah.
On his arm is a tattoo inscribed with her date of her killing, along with an image of the World Trade Center aflame after the September 11th attacks. I would have thought like that would have been the thing that would have made me leave.
Yeah.
To be quite honest with you.
Right.
Like, but this was back in 2019.
Uh-huh.
So he stayed.
Oh, that pushed him into it. This is like all the other people who were like, we're going to go get our get back and went off to, Afghanistan. Like, that was this era of person, that's why he got that, So.
Right. If he knew that at that point, the wars were unwinnable and you chose to stay in it anyway for another 7
This
years,
is
like, you're not a good guy. Like
tattoo inscribed with the date of her killing. So he's putting the date of his wife, which his wife didn't die September 11th. She died in Syria. Like
2019.
Right. So he's putting the World Trade Center attached to that. Like, that's not good.
I would argue he's putting the September 11th attacks ahead of her. Honestly.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, he's using her as a shield, really.
That
like,
when he got that tattoo, he felt the way that, like, yes. Yeah, that's fucked up.
That kind of shows me how much he cared about his wife, really, honestly.
Right.
So, like.
So, Kent's farther right critics have also attacked him for being supported by Peter Thiel, a Silicon Valley venture capitalist who has bankrolled the Senate campaigns of Blake Masters in Arizona and J.D. Vance in Ohio. So, this is three times now that, like, that he's Peter Thiel'd an election for himself, if I'm not mistaken. So, like, and there's even a website, JoeKentIsCIA.com, which opens with the following accusation in all capital letters. Joe Kent is an agent of the deep state, a carpetbagger, a lifelong Marxist, Democrat rhino, and a corrupt opportunist. Well, this person has got all their faculties together, surely. The note on the site says it was built by something called the Republicans Against Rhinos PAC, a group that, if it even exists, is not registered with the Federal Election Commission. And again, Fuentes apparently turned on him, like, even though he was trying to fucking get at events that they were both at, like, right after. So, but here's another catch. 7 Seas says everyone's new moral compass is aligning himself with Mike Flynn and Candace Owens. The gopher for the CIA, Israel and Russia, and the propagandist wife of the House of Lords, buddies with Scientology John Mappin. Everyone involved with America's future wishes to see everyone in America faced with decline to the benefits of Israel and Russia. So Joe Kent will be speaking at the Catholics for Catholics convention in Washington, D.C., alongside Candace Owens and Carrie Prejean Boiler. So, yeah.
That's tomorrow.
Do we see who is behind this particular stunt? Are we starting to put the pieces together? I sure hope so. Like, that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, so moral of the story, Kent is shit. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
So, and you probably will see him in some way, shape, or form in the near future in his resurrected form, whatever that is. So,
yeah.
That's it.
Scan the QR code on your screen. Go to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network if you would like to get around YouTube's tax on our little bit of monetization that we are you know, slowly scrap for, but, you know, we get it. We just want your support. Look, like and subscribe, hit the share button, leave a comment, let us know what you think. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Mew. Chat, is chat holding up? Is chat behaving? Beep, beep, bop, beep, boop, beep, beep. Rumble's all lizard people tonight. No thumbs in the Rumble. No thumbs.
Let's see. Accord Lord. Trying to show. So y'all think gas will be $10 by next weekend? No, but
it depends on where you're at.
Maybe by the summer.
Yeah.
So I'm making a prediction right now. Everyone is going to start buying e-cars or e-bikes if you live in the city. Watch. Especially if like gas continues to go up. So
yeah. He can't reconcile Jelani with his wife's sacrifice. Yep. That's tough. Peter Thiel. People talking about Building 7. Yep. Thiel, Kant, Vance, AI, Claude, and algorithm. So algorithmically, yes.
Vic S. Adams said, please support Shanda from Beauty and the Boomer. She really needs. Yes, thank you for.
And she linked to GoFundMe.
Thank you for that. Yes, and Indy, shout out to him, also did several segments featuring her.
Yeah.
So please check that out if you're not sure what's going on. But Vic C. Adams also put her GoFundMe there. So definitely keep her in your prayers, those of you who are religious or whatever. And if you're able to support financially so that she's able to get through this fuck cancer, definitely help her out. So thank you guys for giving Shanda, our friend, a shout out. Accord Lord, Catholics are vying for position above the Sios. They want their power back. Yeah, I believe that. I would say it's not exclusive to Catholics, though.
Our Father who art in heaven, and to the republic for which it stands. Thy kingdom come, one nation, indivisible, as it is in heaven. Give us this day as we forgive those who so proudly we hail.
Yeah, I don't think it's exclusive to the Catholic side. I think it's just basically all of Christianity, especially the evangelical branches that
and they're being
for that position.
Manipulated as shit everywhere on that side too. So as we've talked about, but you ready to get to our next one?
Yes, this one I have no idea about, so this will be kind of news to me. So
I don't know if you've heard anything about this particular case, but we're gonna get into it. So this involves, and let me look it up again just to make sure I remember the name of it. Is one second. I just have to look at my thing. 2, 1. So we've talked about this, like Trump's national security presidential memorandum, right?
Yes.
Where, he's essentially invented Antifa as a terrorist organization, even though no such organization actually exists. That kind of thing. So that's part of this, right? So Fort Worth, Texas, after 2 days of deliberations, a jury in the continuous Prairieland trial found all 9 defendants guilty on a list of federal crimes. The decision marks a significant blow to protest movements under the Trump admin, which has used the case as a legal test for criminalizing a wide range of historically protected activity. The jury returned guilty verdicts on Friday afternoon, convicting Savannah Batten, Zachary Evans, Autumn Hill, Megan Morris, Maricelo Rueda, Benjamin Song, Daniel Ronaldo Sanchez Estrada, Elizabeth Soto, and Inez Soto of multiple federal offenses. Supporters and legal advocates are deeply concerned about what Friday's verdict represents for the future of protest movements in the U.S. This is a tragedy. One member of the Dallas-Fort Worth support communities, a group of friends, loved ones, and advocates who had been organized support for the defendants, told Unicorn Riot, "This is an injustice, and we should all be very, very worried about what comes next." Batten, Evans, Hill, Morris, Rueda, Song, Soto, and Soto, which were each found guilty of riot, providing material support to terrorists, conspiracy to use and carry an explosive, and using and carrying an explosive. Evans and Song were additionally found guilty of 3 counts, discharging a firearm during a violent crime. Song was also convicted on 1 account of attempted murder of an officer. So, I grabbed this from SharePost. Again, links are in the doobly-doo. I Frankensteined a bit of this, but they write, Antifa is a domestic terror organization that has been allowed to flourish in Democrat-led cities, not under President Trump Attorney General Pam Bondi. So this is, Pam Bondi is manufacturing this narrative here. Today's verdict on terrorism charges will not be the last, as the Trump administration systematically dismantles Antifa and finally halts their violence on American streets. The trial revolved around a nightmare protest at which participants planned to set off fireworks in solidarity with the around 1,000 migrants detained inside the PRAIRIELAND ICE facility. Some participants brought guns, which is legal in Texas, as The Intercept reported. Sam Levine explained in The Guardian what happened next. Shortly after arriving in the facility, 2 or 3 of the protesters broke away from the larger group and began spraying painting cars in the parking lot, a guard shack, slashed the tires on a government van, and broke a security camera. 2 ICE detention guards came out and told the protesters to stop. A police officer arrived on the scene shortly after and drew his weapon at one of the people allegedly doing vandalism. One of the protesters was standing in the woods with an AR-15 and hit him in the shoulder. The officer would survive. Rolando Sanchez Estrada and Rueda were found guilty of conspiracy to conceal documents. Ronaldo Sanchez Estrada was also found guilty of corruptly concealing a document. Hill, Evans, Morris, and Rueda were found not guilty of discharging a firearm and attempted murder of an officer, and Song was found not guilty on 2 or 3 counts of attempted murder of an officer. So here we have like all these counts, right? All of the hit with riot, practically, providing material support to terrorists. We'll get to that in a bit. Again, I said most of these, Benjamin Song, riot, providing material support to terrorists, attempted murder of an officer, right? This one, Daniel Ronaldo Sanchez Estrada, corruptly concealing a document. Corruptly concealing a document. What does that even fucking mean? And conspiracy to conceal documents. Okay? We're going to get to him in just a second. So, riot, providing materials, again, random, ridiculous things. So, Indy sent me this where he covered exactly what this guy did. So, he has a nickname. Des Revol, right? Was the guy I just talked about. So, we'll have Indy explain.
This whole story is insane. So this is in response to, remember there was an ICE agent that was killed at an ICE facility, or allegedly, and there were people that were protesting. They arrested 16 people. And these are the people that were protesting to get those arrested out. Because 16 people didn't kill an ICE agent. What's going on here? Texas resident Des Revol, in particular, is being targeted by the Trump admin under these guidelines. He did not attend the July 4th demonstration in Alvarado but he was arrested 2 days afterwards after he had a phone call with his wife, who was detained at the noise demonstration. FBI agents stopped him for a traffic violation in Denton, Texas. Anthony Malecki, our friend Cowboy Kitty, will know all about that, and took him into custody at gunpoint. Authorities charged him with evidence tampering, constituting obstruction of justice, as well as conspiracy, alleging that he transported a box that contained numerous Antifa materials from his residence to another location. This literature, which is pamphlets and magazines commonly found in activist spaces, became the basis for his prosecution. Despite having no connection to the original demonstration, he's facing potential federal imprisonment and additional risks from both immigration enforcement and hostile right-wing groups that have publicly now targeted, identified, and doxed him online. Insane for publishing, for distributing a magazine. So read this story. This is
so. Dude just had magazines in his car, picking up his wife.
Yeah.
All right. So, like, at first, the federal government charged those arrested after this event with attempted murder of a police officer. However, that changed after Trump designation of Antifa as a terror group in September and the release of National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, which directs federal law enforcement to target left-leaning groups and activities. The next month, the government case expanded to include terrorism charges. This wouldn't be a terrorism case if it weren't for that memo, one defense lawyer told Notice on Background. The prosecution argued that the fact the protesters wore black clothes to the protest was enough to convict them of material support for terrorism. Providing your body as camouflage for others to do the enumerated acts is providing support, Assistant U.S. Attorney Sean Smith said during arguments. It's impossible to tell who is doing that. Doing what? That's the point. The defense, meanwhile, warned the jury about the free speech implications of the charge. The government is asking you to put protesters in prison as terrorists. You're the only people who can stop that, Blake Burns, an attorney for defendant Elizabeth Soto, said, according to The Guardian. When the villain is a made-up boogeyman, then the target becomes anyone who disagrees with Trump, and this is the result. Under federal statuses, riot convictions carry a maximum sentence of 5 years. Providing material support to terrorists carries a maximum sentence of 15 years. Conspiracy to use and using an explosive each carry a maximum sentence of 20 years. Each count of attempted murder of an officer carries a maximum sentence of 20 years. Discharging a firearm carries a minimum sentence of 10. Concealing a document and conspiracy to conceal a document each carry a maximum sentence of 20 years. Sentencing is set for June. So we'll keep an eye on the sentencing for sure, but as the administration works to implement Trump broad and far-reaching NSPM 7 and other executive orders, defendants and supporters worry that Friday's results could set a significant precedent for trying similar cases moving forward. Xavier T. Desjardins, a defense attorney who has worked alongside the Prairieland defendants and represented Elizabeth Soto, is concerned about the precedent the conviction sets. The federal government has signaled successfully that very regular protest activities could get you federally charged and federally convicted, at least in North Texas, D. Jenan told Unicorn Riot. So, you remember this thumbnail, Care Bear? This one right here? Yeah. With my pretty pink unicorns and whatnot. So, we talked about Keith McHenry's group Food Not Bombs also being lumped into this. Some of the materials that allegedly get you put on this list are things that they put out, right? So that's part of it, you know. Indy's talked to Keith McHenry as well and had him on the show. People should go watch that. But you can also go check out our coverage of him being lumped in under this in our where's that at? We have a whole clip. What do they call that? Playlist. That was it. We have a whole clip playlist. You can find it in there. So, Dijon sees the PRAIRIELAND case as a representative of a new norm for federal prosecutions against protesters, one where numerous defendants are named and accused of severe charges. He drew a comparison in the Minnesota church protest case, which has seen dozens of people, including journalists, covering the story, indicted after disrupting a service at a church where a pastor is also a high-ranking ICE official. I think moving forward, that is what the federal government will threaten, and I think will change, Dijon said. The case hinged on portraying the defendants as a terrorist cell, describing those involved in the last year's protests as members of Antifa, a shorthand for anti-fascist. While Antifa has long been a target for right-wing politicians, Trump's executive order from September of last year designated the movement as a homeland security threat and promised to increase targeting of the anarchist enterprise that Antifa represents, despite the fact that no such group or organization exists. Nonetheless, the prosecution described those who took part in last year's protest as a radical domestic terror threat and used that characterization to charge defendants for organizing, printing, and transporting literature and participating in the demonstration. 9 defendants, representing half of the 18 people arrested in relation to the 2025 noise demonstration outside the PRAIRIELAND ICE Detention Center in Alvarado, Texas, went on trial beginning on February 17th. The first attempt at a trial was abruptly halted when the U.S. District Court Judge Mark Pittman, a Trump appointee, abruptly declared a mistrial during jury selection after it became clear that the jury pool was not sympathetic to immigration and customs enforcement. Pittman also took issue with the defense attorney's shirt, which depicted a civil rights leader, apparently in homage to the recently deceased Jesse Jackson, who had died that morning. So that got you out of the, jury on that one. You were wearing the Reverend Jesse Jackson. So, some people are now a lot of Jesse Jackson shirts are getting fucking bought right now just because of that. If it gets me out of jury duty. The following week, the trial resumed and continued for 13 days before the defense and prosecution rested their cases Thursday. The trial itself was marked with irregularities. Following the declaration of a mistrial, Judge Pittman took control of the voir dire, or jury selection process. Pittman ordered attorneys who normally pose questions to potential jurors directly to submit their questions to him for review. He asked questions at his discretion. Public access to the courtroom was severely limited through the case, and media broadcasts from inside the courtroom were not allowed. Judge Pittman ordered an overflow seating area to be established, but it was set up in a separate courthouse in Dallas, more than 30 miles away from where the trial was taking place. A live stream of the courtroom in Fort Worth was set up to broadcast in the overflow room, but the feed regularly cut out, leaving observers and members of the press without information such as which jurors were retained during final jury selection. Dijon saw the irregularities as a detriment to the defense's case. All the odds were stacked against the defendants from the start, he said. The rulings of the judge, the way the courtroom was closed, the fact that the first jury was declared a mistrial where this was happening, the very strict rules on who can take these cases in North Texas, the sanctions that the judge imposed on defense attorneys for filing very normal motions, all this piled up to end in this result. Outside the U.S. District Court in Fort Worth, supporters gathered throughout the trial to show solidarity with the defendants and raise awareness about the case. Community members and supporters from across the country gathered daily to rally and host events ranging from potlucks to educational sessions to rallies at a park near the courthouse. Supporters showed solidarity with the defendants, who many see as stand-ins for protesters moving forward under Trump. A statement from Dallas-Fort Worth Support Committee released shortly after the verdict was issued expressed dismay over the results, but affirmed the group's commitment to continued support those convicted. Thoughts, Care Bear?
So much for free speech.
Yep. So
This is what they care about.
just wild, right? So I have this thread, which should be my last thing. So Hanny Riley Fernandez, if you've ever worn black to a protest, used Signal, or carried a first aid kit, a federal jury has decided that can all be evidence of terrorism. A quick thread on the Prairieland's conviction from last week and what they mean for the right to protest in the U.S. First, to be clear, the prosecution was a test from the Trump admin to see if they could convict protesters of terrorism for showing up to a demonstration, and they succeeded. The terrorist organization in question, Antifa, which literally just means being anti-fascism and is not an organization of any kind, the government convicted people of materially supporting a vibe and ideology. One person was charged with attempted murder for the shot officer, but 18 other people got swept up in the case, some who weren't even there, charged with things like deleting a group chat or helping someone find a ride or moving a box of pamphlets. The trial was a bit of a farce. First attempt was declared a mistrial because the defense attorney wore a short with MLK Jr. on it under her blazer, and the Trump-appointed judge fined the defense for filing routine discovery motions. He also kept a very tightly closed courtroom. The jury convicted 7 people of materially supporting terrorism, aka Antifa, or being in attendance at a demonstration to show solidarity and support to the people caged in the ICE facility. The Prairieland convictions mean if your ideology puts you in opposition to the state, there's now a framework for making said opposition a federal crime. Quotillion protest stuff is an evidence of terrorism is somehow around you. There's something the government decides is violent. So, anything you got to add? Yeah.
This sucks.
Yes, it does. Like, I don't know how far-reaching this is going to be, but not like they needed any other ways of rounding you up and convicting you of things. But seems like they've made an easy path on the paperwork, so be careful out there. But talking about this is why YouTube has demonetized us and then remonetized us because they needed some of our money again, I guess. So don't pay the YouTube tax. Go to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network or scan that QR code on your screen and you can, give all your money directly to us instead. But really, we just want your thoughts, some engagement. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. How far is this precedent going to set? Otherwise, thanks for watching. We did it.
We did it.
We made it. What's coming up this week? So, yeah. Anyway, what's chat up to? Fight for control. Anyway, me and Indy gonna be doing boat Sunday night. I think Angel's got stuff Friday and Saturday, right?
Should be.
Yeah. I don't know if Andy's doing a thing Thursday. He said he might, but we'll see about that. And then we're not going to be here next Wednesday unless I find something to I might find some stories that people haven't watched and make them watch those, but otherwise, same bad time, same bad channel. So follow us at Getting News on Twitter. You can always find schedules there. Links to all our stuff is in the doobly-doo. Anything you want to tell people before we head out of here?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Love you. Thanks for supporting us and all the things.
Remember, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week, everyone.
There's a difference between peace and liberation, is there not? You can have injustice and have peace. Isn't that correct? And peace and be enslaved.
Yes.
So peace isn't the answer.
No.
Liberation is the answer.